Okay, and welcome to our virtual family council meeting. My name is Jamie Rose. I'm your virtual family council coordinator. We're going to review our confidentiality reminder. Please refrain from using the name of your loved one. Do not name specific facilities. Please use a nursing home or the personal care home to present to the group. If you need specific assistance, please use the chat feature to state which county you are in, and we will get you connected to your local ombudsman. These calls have public access and are designed for family members and friends of residents in long-term care facilities. We'll review our meeting agenda. We're going to get our virtual meeting tips from Eliza. Then we'll turn it over to the Center for Loss and Bereavement, and then we'll finish up with our upcoming meeting topics. So I'm going to turn it over to Eliza to review our virtual meeting tips.
Hi, everyone. Just to go over the tips for tonight. So you all have been placed in mute upon entry to the meeting. So we will open those lines in a bit so that everyone's able to talk and share as they wish. If you would like to speak, we do ask that you use the raise hand feature. Once your hand is raised, then we will acknowledge that you would like to speak and we will unmute your line for you to be able to do so. If you hover your mouse near the bottom of the screen, you will see the participants tab. You can expand that if you would like to see who all is in the meeting with us this evening. The chat feature is also at the bottom of your screen, right next to the participants tab. You can maximize that and it will let you send questions to the chat moderator and others during this call as well. Closed captioning is available on the call. If you would like to enable that feature, push the CC icon at the bottom of your screen and it will enable the closed captioning. If you need to step away from the computer, we do ask that you stop sharing the video of your camera, step away to do whatever it is that you need to do. And then when you come back and are ready to have your video on again, just hit the little camera. I am very tongue-tied this evening. Camera icon, and that will start sharing your video again. And then any concerns or complaints that you have, we do ask that you send those to the state ombudsman. That number is 717-783-8975, or you can email them at ltcombudsman@pa.gov. And I believe they did just put that in the chat as well. So you can access all of that information there as well. So I'm going to send it back over to Jamie.
Thank you, Eliza. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Claire Drexel and Shelly Robbins from the Center for Loss and Bereavement. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you guys present.
Sure.
Thanks.
Jamie, do we ask you to do our slide turning? Are you that person? Okay, perfect. Well, hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here tonight. Just really looking forward and feeling privileged to share this time and space with you. And Claire and I are both very casual people who we welcome questions and dialogue, and feel free to pick our brains throughout. We're going to just talk for a bit, and then at the end, feel free to discuss any kind of questions that you would like. We're kind of open books in that way, and we'll just kind of go through some of this and try to tease out some feelings that are associated with some of the topics that we're going to talk about. So Jamie, if you just want to advance our next slide there. Yeah, and we're probably coming from all different areas of Pennsylvania, I'm assuming. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with our area, but we are the Center for Loss and Bereavement, and we're about 30 miles west of Center City, Philadelphia. And what we are is that we are a nonprofit counseling center, and we provide all sorts of different types of services for people who are struggling with just general grief and loss and looking to find their way after some of the most painful times in their lives. We provide one-on-one counseling, and we're doing that all virtually now through telehealth with our licensed therapists. And we also provide children's counseling support groups through our Nella's Corner program. And we do 6-week specialized adult support groups for varied types of losses. We also run a 1-week camp in our summer called Camp Millie that takes care of teens from ages 4 through 18. suffering from all sorts of grief and loss issues from several different types of losses. And then we also do things like this, where we meet the needs of the community, both locally and regionally, and just talk about just things that we're all suffering through, especially this year in the pandemic of grief and loss. And we do a little bit of education with it. And we also do things with roundtable trainings where we talk with mental health professionals who are looking to get a little bit more education in the bereavement field. So Jamie, if you'd like to advance. Just a little bit about ourselves. Claire, if you'd like to go first.
Well, I'm a therapist at the center. That doing one-on-one therapy is my primary function at the center. I love it. I've been doing it for over 40 years in various settings that you can see here. I've been at the Center for Loss and Bereavement for almost 14. I've really specialized in grief and bereavement pretty much my whole career, and working at the center has been an awesome opportunity to expand on that. So you can read yourself what that whole bio there thing. So I won't bore you with that. So I'm very glad to be here today. I know that this, speaking to people who are coping with grief and bereavement in the ways that you guys are, that loss is an overriding concern for everyone. So I'm real happy to offer up a few opportunities to think about it in different ways.
Yeah.
Claire, this is Jeannie. I'm the chat moderator.
Mm-hmm.
I also have a background in hospice
Mm-hmm.
for several years as a volunteer coordinator. Would you please explain thanatology to the people?
Oh, that's great.
that are-
Yes, I'm certified in thanatology, which is through the Association of Death Educators and Counselors. And thanatology is the study of death and dying. So it is an interesting field. It's often I always say I'm a lot of fun at cocktail parties, talking about what I do, but it's thanatology, exactly. So the study of death and dying.
I would say it's a field that you're drawn to.
Yes.
It takes a special type of person because you kind of, you're not necessarily somebody that people would maybe find all the time uplifting, and that you're talking about death, dying, and bereavement. But for us who are in the field, we really is enjoy the right word, Claire, but we
I think so. It's gratifying. It's a gratifying, yes.
to help people who are really in some of the lowest points of their lives. And
Right.
so, and I'm Shelley Robbins. I also work at the center, and I have a little bit of a different background than really anybody at the center. That I have been 5 years, and I have been at the center for probably about 3 now. But I have always worked, even throughout my medical genre of my career, with families who are in extreme emotional pain through medical trauma. And so they kind of all have tied in throughout the years. And I've done work in hospice and palliative care. And I specifically and am certified with pediatrics. And I also too am certified in thanatology. So again, we have kind of open books and have lots of resources in our brains, but we are also real people that you can just kind of poke and we can kind of get to the root of the matter of all of this. So if you want to advance, Jamie. And Claire, if you would like to take this
Sure,
slide. My computer sounds like it's kind of overheating here. So
it's growling at you. Is it growling
is.
at you? Okay.
I'm just going to check the back of it while you just talk about that.
Well, we just wanted to put this slide up a little bit to just give a little bit of framework for what we're going to talk about. What is grief and how does it relate to the COVID-19 situation, and particularly the COVID-19 situation in long-term care? It's experiencing the psychological, behavioral, social, and physical reactions to the perception of the loss. And so we have perception bolded and capped because a loss is a very individual loss to an individual person some persons may have differing reactions to the loss based on who they are and what their experience has been. So I think that's really important. Grief is individual, grief is personal, grief is something that we always have to take into context, look at the context with which it's happened. It's all grief of a physical loss. So this is potentially from the dying person's perspective and the caregiver's perspective. You know, what are each of these people experiencing? You know, what is the decline? What's the loss? What's the change? You know, the physical change. Psychological loss, or psychosocial loss, it's a little bit more intangible. You know, the social death of a dying person and the caregiver and what they're doing. You know, when someone's aging, when someone's in long-term care facilities, their identity changes. It's a different context with which they're living and experiencing their dying. The same with the caregiver. And then with relating to COVID-19, I think the key term here that we would like for you to think about is what we call the loss of our assumptive world. That's the way we think it should be. You know, it's very basic, you know, that you should be able to be with your loved ones as they're sick and dying, that we shouldn't have to be quarantined, that we shouldn't have to deal with all of the things that are happening. And that loss of assumptive world is on, several different levels. I mean, losing someone, is also a loss, a loss of assumptive world. As people die, as people age, lots of things that they think should be aren't anymore. And it is a lot of ambiguity. You know, what's our touch point? What's normal? What's not normal? What's expected? What's not expected? So, when you think about it, everyone right now is coping with the loss of our assumptive world, that these things don't happen, that somehow it should have been able to be stopped, that we are safe, all of those assumptions that we have about life, that we should be able to grow old with the people we love around us is an assumption that a lot of people hold. And we have to deal with the fact that for right now, that's not true or possible. So.
One thing I'd like to add with this slide is that something that I think somewhat takes people by surprise with grief is that how all-encompassing it is, that we are holistic beings that have, a psychosocial side, a spiritual side, cognitive, emotional, physical, and that all of those entities of ourselves are tapped into with grief. We don't get out of it just necessarily feeling one prong of our sense of self. Especially with physical, people don't realize how physical grief can be, and that it is a heaviness that you sometimes feel apathetic to the world and just low motivation to get out of bed in the morning, or you might have a lot of insomnia or appetite changes. And even, it does things to us neurophysiologically that we may have problems with regulating our temperature, or maybe sweating, or have increased pulse rate. People think to themselves, why do I feel so different? What's going on with myself? Why do I feel so untethered? Why do I not have any type of motivation to do anything? Or why am I questioning why do I not want to go on in this world? And it's because you are experiencing all facets of grief. And if you think about this with persons that are in long-term care facilities, they're feeling this as well. And you are as family member of those people. So just something to think about, that we are holistic beings feeling all sorts of hits from grief. Go ahead, you can advance there. Yeah, and just like Claire kind of already touched upon, that because of COVID, we have so many death-related losses. Unfortunately, I think sadly we're up to 465 the last time, 465,000 deaths. And I think probably everybody on this call can probably testify that they've known somebody at some touch point who has died because of COVID, or maybe even non-COVID losses. This has been a tough year for people. And even if you happen to not know of any deaths, I think it's 27 million cases of COVID at this point, that we are experiencing this collective grief. And I think that's important to get to the root of the matter of this is that our world has been radically flipped upside down. And what we are dealing with at the heart of all the changes of ourselves is grief and loss. People may put other terms to it, and it might present itself as anger or frustration. But if you really get down to the real root of it, it's usually grief,
Mhm.
grief
Mhm.
motivated.
Right.
Yeah. Claire, did you have anything to add?
No,
there?
that's exactly true. You know,
Yeah.
that it's you know, it manifests itself in lots of different ways, and we all have um you know, personality based abilities to cope with that, and what's difficult for one person might not be so difficult for someone else, so we need to really bear that in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Do something, and we'll touch on this in a little bit in a few other slides, but funerals and rites and rituals within the land of COVID have been so radically changed. And for us as professionals who deal with grieving people, that has been a key ingredient to some kind of like some stalling of healing, is that people have not had a lot of closure this year with their grieving experiences, especially in the beginning of COVID, when things were so tightly locked down and people didn't know how to adapt or how to make creative changes within like the funeral arena. Now things are a little bit people have gotten creative of how they can get their closure in new ways. But whenever we
Oh,
talk,
it's more acceptable now
yeah,
because
yeah,
people have started to do different things, and others have said, well, they've done that, so that gives them, you know, a chance to you know, see that it may be okay to do something different. And you know, rites and rituals are related to lots of spheres of our lives. You know, they're related to spiritual, they're
mm,
related to, you know, social, familial kinds of things, and it's kind of, you know, when you've experienced the loss, the death of someone, and your ability to think and reason is limited because of the assault that this is to your personality, your person. Um, Falling back on rites and rituals is it's comforting because you may not,
mm,
you just do what everyone's done before you, because and not have to really think it through. And now you do have to think it through. And in the beginning, like Shelley said, it was hard for people to do something other than what we've always done. And now that's sort of getting a little easier, and a little, people are a little bit more flexible about that. So,
yeah, because we've been forced to be,
yep, yep,
you know.
for sure.
Yeah, there's all sorts of creative ways, and we'll go through that in the next few slides, but and just all sorts of non-death related losses that I think that we can all probably pretty much attest to at this point, of just the social isolation for ourselves as family members and for our loved ones who are in nursing homes and facilities. The isolation can be paralyzing at times. And so how do we do that? How do we get through some of those things? And we'll talk about those. Just for kids, extracurricular activities and schooling, independence for everybody has changed, financial stability. Like Claire talked about, the assumptive world has been shaken. It's basically been, you know, been grabbed by the bullhorns, and like we've all been given a good shake. So how do we get through this? So Jamie, if you want to advance. Yeah, and the root of the matter, what would you say that it is, Claire?
Well, I would say that it is accepting that the situation is changing, ever changing, and that we have very little control over of a lot of things that we would like to think we did have control. Maybe we never did, but we'd like to think that we do. And so to acknowledge our helplessness is sort of an important thing, and that coping and managing and working through things is doing something. It might be like trying to put your finger on a moving target, but and that feels bad because we can't solve it, but we are actually doing a lot. So yeah, yeah.
When you say doing a lot, one thing that comes to my mind this year, and I've had to remind myself this on a personal level too, is accepting that we can't do it all, and that we are all, like Claire said, We kind of pretend that we're more in control than we are, but we really are all just living day by day, minute by minute. No tomorrow is promised. So accepting that you can't do this all and that you have to give yourself grace. So if you're feeling out of control as a family member who might have a person that you love dearly in a nursing home, knowing that you are only one piece of this puzzle. You cannot solve all of this problem for your loved one, or this not being able to see them. And that you have to work together with other family members and maybe the nursing home to kind of work through this and get through this situation. That comes with all sorts of different family dynamics, which are also lovely, that we've all experienced, and that are not always fun and are not always pretty. And I would say that for the most part, grief is not pretty. It's
Right.
not these bundled stages that you may have heard of. That's kind of a myth at this point. Whenever we're talking about thanatology, is that we don't move from neat little package stages in a linear line. We kind of dip in and out of grief throughout our entire grieving process. And so I think that if we are able to name this for what it is, we're able to kind of get through this pandemic a little bit easier. And that's a wellhead loss.
Yeah, there's a really good book out. It's called "It's Okay Not to Be Okay," and I'm totally blanking on the author's name right now. I can get it to someone if they're interested, but I think that's really important. It's okay not to be okay. That what are difficult feelings, like we say here, anger, fear, anxiety, sadness, frustration, those are very real reactions to a very difficult circumstance. And for you to acknowledge that sometimes you're just angry or afraid, or that's okay, that you're not doing something, or you're not doing this well. It's not that you're not doing this well. Does that make sense? That that it is actual, and that just because something's uncomfortable doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be fixed.
Good point. Yeah. So sometimes it isn't.
Megan Divide. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just kind of quickly.
Megan Divide. It's okay not to be okay. Great. Thank you. Whoever did that. That's perfect.
There's also a few other different authors too, but I think that's the one that you're referring to.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Megan Divide. I blanked on her name.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jamie, you can forward to the next one. Yeah, so if you really look at the practical everydayness of how do we get through this with our loved ones who are in nursing homes or facilities, what are some things that we need to consider? And Claire, jump in at any point with this.
I will.
Yeah, you have a little bit of experience that
I do.
Just understanding someone's cognitive ability is huge, paramount, that I'm sure probably people can identify with.
Absolutely.
It's hard to see your people decline, your loved ones decline. And whenever you place your very dear loved ones into a nursing home, whether they are in agreement or not, there's all sorts of feelings that come with that. There could be feelings of guilt or sadness that life is changing, and not everybody in the family may be on board with the same decision. There might be a sibling or a child that is making more of the decision than others. And so with that comes some real undercurrent of feelings within families. And so you come to the situation that we're in right now, where your loved ones are somewhat feeling trapped within this isolation. And so you kind of have to tease out those other variables and think, what can we do now to improve the situation? And one of them is to look at your loved one's cognitive baseline ability. And how can you reach them when you might not be able to visit them? And the one is technology. Any experience with that, Claire, would you say?
Oh, yeah. Technology is interesting. Just for full disclosure, my mother is in a assisted living facility, part of a continuing care community, and she's in the personal care and has had some strokes and difficulties through the whole thing. And I think that, as a concerned caregiver for her, part of my job, and maybe a lot of you can relate to this, was to try to keep her on the beam, so to speak. I took an active part in trying to keep her oriented and her mental capacity good, or as, I was almost a, part of the therapy team to continue to help her improve and recover from her strokes and the things that would happen. And at some point, because it worked for our family, I had to, sort of back off on that, because through FaceTime, which is, fortunately she's able to do that and we're able to communicate, but I had to kind of back off and say, I can't be part of that right now because I don't have access to her. And that's, so technology's been wonderful, but it also gave me the illusion for a long time that I could use that technology to, help her in a way that was just stressing us both out. So it's something to think about. And like I said, everyone's different and everyone has a certain orientation. But I think, whatever the reframing that you have to do of the circumstance, it's still the same process. So yeah, technology. Oh yeah. Technology's
Good
tough.
point. Like, yeah, it's a double-edged sword. We always think that it's like a bonus, that we can reach them, but it might make the person more confused
Or frustrated.
have more ruminative thoughts. They're relying oftentimes on staff to help them. And maybe that staff is really overworked and really busy right now. And you're just mounting frustration. So I think you make a really good point, Claire, that sometimes it's good to step away from something that seems in writing like a good tool to use.
Oh yeah. Well, and important to me, that
Yeah.
it was hard to let go. Mhm.
Yeah. Something that I wanted to note with this slide was, I think, and this is when we talked about making friends with our helplessness, is the pressure of time when your person goes into a facility or nursing care home of, I only have so much time left with my loved one. And now we're given this situation with the pandemic that you feel this tick-tock, this clock ticking of like, I even have less time with them now. And making peace with that of this is this unexpected situation that none of us envisioned, and not getting into ruminative thinking of you can't change it. So what can you do to change the things? What can you control? So we have that pressure, but to give yourself grace with that. Yeah, Jamie.
Okay, go ahead, Jamie. Thanks.
Yeah.
And we, we may or may not have to, I think that, if you have questions about this moving forward, into the discussion area, we can talk about it. But we talked about, because the funeral rites and rituals or any other kind of ritual is unavailable to us right now, to think of new ways, think about what the ritual gets us and other ways to get it, I guess is what we're trying to talk about, acknowledge which aspects of ritual and are important and why, what do we do? How do we do it? To have a birthday party, maybe always part of your family makeup, but maybe there's a different way to do it, that kind of thing. So it's, and then of course the very obvious things here that we need to do in order to accommodate, to get the ritual that you want, is to postpone and change it in order to be able to make do.
Yeah, I think like just with everything else in this world, it's important to be adaptive. You, your person, you might have lost a loved one in the winter, but you may need to hold off until the summer to have a true celebration. And so what does that do to your grief?
Mhm.
You have to look, and what am I going to do with myself until that time? Is that going to postpone my grieving? And not necessarily, just might change it a bit. And so to remain to be flexible.
I'm looking at two of the comments in the chat feature here about, one saying that with loss of group activities and that cognitive decline is been given up, preventing cognitive decline has been given up on, and that because they're isolated now and don't go to meals and don't go out to activities and kinds of things, that there's the associated physical decline that goes with the inability to be able to move outside of their, small space and room. And yeah, that's really very challenging. Maybe some of you could offer ways that you try to, that you personally could affect that. I know advocating for your loved one with the facility to make sure they do the best they can to see, what kind of supportive and rehab kinds of services are available to people. But yeah, it's a very hard thing to watch and know that. And, and to figure out what your role in that is, what can you do, to change that dynamic. And if there is nothing that you can do, really, then to, seek support to try to figure out how to find a way to, make peace with that. And yeah, very tough, very tough.
Mhm.
I hear it.
Yeah, I mean, sadly, there is no quick, easy answers for this. We don't have magic bullet remedies, and it's extremely hard to sit back and to see your person decline.
Mhm.
And yeah, Claire, you hit the nail on the head as far as just to seek support, kind of like putting on your own oxygen mask, because you can only help yourself first before you help others. So if you let those feelings of failure into your heart and mind, then you're not going to be helpful to your person in the nursing home. So, and we'll talk through this afterwards.
Mhm.
Jamie, you can advance forward.
I like this capacity. I read this article not too long ago, and I like ways to be able to frame feelings, to be able to sort of identify them and as we said before, name it. And I like that surge capacity. You think about it in, that you have a surge protector on your computer, you have a surge protector on your television, you have all these ways to be able to release the tension when the surge becomes overwhelming. And we don't have that, or it is limited, or the ways that we would help ourselves manage our surges is unavailable to us because of the pandemic. So it's it's a collection of adaptive systems, mental and physical. Everybody can sort of mount the fight for a short period of time. We have the ability to, if there's a crisis, if there's something that happens, we can put other things aside and focus our attention on that and get the problem solved. But when it goes on, when it drags on, our ability to withstand that surge, this continual surge that we are all feeling. And because we're all feeling it, it's easy to minimize what we're feeling, because you can always look around and say, well, so-and-so has it worse, or at least this didn't happen. And that, it's kind of helpful in one way to give you perspective. If you're doing that to give yourself perspective, that's helpful. But if you're doing that to wonder why you can't do better, that's not very helpful. To say, well, so-and-so has it worse and they're doing it better is just not very, very helpful at all. We have to, honor our own feelings and our own capacities and deal with that. And figure out what fights to fight, what things to, make
Put
sure
your
happen.
Put your energy into.
Right.
I think something that's important to note with the surge capacity too is pacing. Of we're in this huge marathon and no one knows the finish line. And I personally, in my much fitter days, used to run marathons. And when I first started off, I was very calculated and I knew my path and I knew exactly my mile markers. And I remember doing this one marathon at one point at the Jersey Shore, and I didn't know the path. I didn't know where the finish line was. I just decided to go for it one day and I was a wreck. I did not know how my pacing should be. I did not know how I should feel at certain points. And this pandemic very much reminds me of those feelings, that nobody knows where we're at in this. In the beginning, you thought, okay, I can hunker down and I can do this for a few months, and I can pull within my own resources and I can get through this. But now that this is going on and on, you have to think, what do I need to personally do to persevere my energy?
Oh, and also be aware of this in your loved one.
Yes.
That depending on, their cognitive ability, their personality, their ability, their view of the world, they may have a different expectation, people who say, I think there was another comment in there that we can touch on now, but that at a certain point, our loved ones, start to put this whole thing into perspective and say, well, I've lived a long time, and you know, I'm okay. If this is what happens, this is what happens, and that may rattle us, to our core. That doesn't feel good to hear our loved ones say, whatever happens, happens. I think the comment was, give the vaccine to someone else, give that vaccine to a younger person, those kinds of things. And that's
A valid point.
it is a
Yeah.
valid point, and it's a reflection on aging. It's a reflection on coming to terms with the fact that they're not going to live forever, nor should they. And that may be different than from where we are, because we're losing them, and that feels awful.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, to understand our limits, to understand what's going on with our loved ones, to understand what we can fix and what we can't fix. But if we could go to the next slide, I think a little bit of just probably nothing that you haven't thought about before. But,
Common
as a therapist, I've, almost literally preached self-care. I hate to use that term preach, but it sometimes bordered on that forever, for my whole career.
Mhm.
That idea, like what Shelley said, that, you can't help someone else if you are not um, in a good place. We talk at the center a lot about something that we call the helper's pit,
Mhm.
that we're all helpers, caregivers. We're helpers in our profession, we're helpers in our personal lives. And you don't want to, when someone's struggling, when someone's in a difficult circumstance, you don't want to get down in the pit with them, because then neither of you can get out. You
Mhm.
want to be able to stay up on the side and reach in and help pull them out, or help encourage them out, or problem solve for them. So taking care of yourself is essential. It is not selfish. And we women of a certain age know that we've been socialized in ways that where it's not cool sometimes to think of ourselves, that if we think of ourselves first, that's somehow selfish. That's not selfish, to sort of reevaluate all of those things. And just like grief affects us in these 5 ways, like we mentioned before, emotionally, cognitively, socially, spiritually, and physically, that's how grief affects us. So in each of those areas, um, there are things that are able to mitigate what's happening. So, emotional, focus on your feelings, journaling, let yourself lean on others, evaluate what I would say would be evaluate your definition of strong. That's really important. I talk to people too. As you'll see, I like these sort of visuals or word definitions, but that when we're dealing with this, we have to develop what I call grief muscles.
Mm.
It's not that our grief ever goes away, and whether it's a death grief or a loss grief, it doesn't go away. We develop the capacity to bear it. So it's like working out. You work out. You at first you can't lift 5 pounds. But as you work out with those 5 pounds in mind, you develop the ability to be able to lift it. And that is a similar process that we go through with grief. It's not, we don't get over it. We don't, it stays with us, but we develop the capacity to bear it, to put it in perspective, to put it in context of our whole selves and beings. And so that's focusing on those emotions is important. Um, Cognitively, like Shelley said before, focus on what you can control. You know, we can't make COVID go away yet, but we can do some things potentially to make that better. Um, Social, maintain your friendships, actively reach out to people, understand, come to the virtual family group like we are doing right now, because all of you are struggling with similar things. Um, Ask for what you need. Don't expect your friends will know what this experience is like for you unless you tell them. It's the burden of the bereaved. You have to tell people how to treat you. Spiritual, be in touch with your core values. That can be religious, it can be nature, it can be, what is it that
What
fills you up?
Mhm.
What fills you up? And physical, get outside, just do what you can do things that help calm us, because as Shelley talked about in the beginning, there really is, when you're living under this level of stress for this long, this is a physical neurobiological reaction. Our brains are on high alert all the time, and that is not good for us. So it's so we need to do the things that help us counteract it. When we're in that level of high alert reactivity, our bodies are pumping out cortisol and adrenaline, and we need shots of some of the other stuff like endorphins and oxytocins. Get a hug, give a hug, get a hug. Exercise. Back in my early days, I would tell people, you really need to exercise. And I knew it helped, but I didn't actually understand completely why. I mean, I knew it helped, and then now we can put people's heads in MRIs and we can see what happens when you do exercise. So it's really,
we're not
really,
supposed to be in constant fight or
no,
flight mode.
no, we're not supposed to be.
You can't endure that. And somebody wrote in here on the chat of taking care of yourself is like or not taking care of yourself is like saying, I don't have time to put gas in my car. Well, at some point that car is going to conk out.
Right.
And so caregiver burden is very real, whether your person is 10 miles down the road from you and they're not in a home yet, and you're just kind of watching them. You may be in the pre-steps of putting them into a nursing home, or whether you're a caregiver caring for somebody who's in a home already. Caregiver burden and burnout is very real, as well as compassion fatigue is very real, and COVID fatigue. So it's like three things that you have hitting yourself. So Jamie, if you want to go to the next slide, these kind of seem like kind of trite things to say, of what we can do to take care of ourselves. And they look kind of common sense-ish. But my advice would be, what has worked for you in the past? What has been your go-to for supports for yourself? Lean into that. Does that work for you in this time period of supporting somebody within a nursing facility during COVID? Or do you need more? Do you need different? So if you've never worked out, if you've never exercised at all in your life, go take a walk, like Claire said. How does that feel to you? Or something like as simple as maybe listening to a podcast might give you different perspective on something. Or like Claire said, joining a chat like this. Just different expressive arts can sometimes be helpful for people. Journaling, writing your feelings down, tapping into photography or drawing, just to try to do something different, would you say, Claire?
Yes, absolutely. And that as and that's more than just a simple diversion. That actually calms our brains. And, we can go through a whole thing about mindfulness, that's the thing that we talk about. And, mindfulness practice, using a meditation kind of thing is actually a huge part of the cure for post-traumatic stress. It's calming that reactive brain, and it's not a character thing. It's a neurobiological thing.
And something that I think is important to do at the onset of your day, because it sets you up for positive thinking. If you're able to put yourself into a positive mindset for that day, not always easy to do. but something to be aware of. But one thing, I just want to make sure we have time for lots of questions. So I think,
Yep.
Judy, why don't you advance and see where we're at?
I think we're done. We're
Oh,
done.
yeah, we are towards the end there. Yeah, these are just resources that we tend to recommend from online sources. But there's lots and lots of books out there, similar to the one that Claire mentioned earlier. And it's just a matter of like figuring out what speaks to you, where you get your support from, what's your style. But these are some touch points as to where we would start from. So I believe that this is being recorded and that you will have access to this. So that way that you can just kind of click onto these links. Oh yeah, it's a message from Jamie in the chat so that she's going to send out these resources.
Great. Great.
Yeah.
Hello, we do have a hand up from Deep's Library. Can he ask a question, please?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, we're done. We're done with our presentation.
Okay, Deep's Library.
Okay, hi, my name is Terry,
Hey, Terry.
and I'm actually a resident in a nursing home,
Mm,
but I'm also a retired ER nurse.
mm,
So I've been dealing from death and dying from along many years, but now it's from a different focus.
yeah.
You know, before working in the ED, you dealt with death and dying. It happened. You dealt with it. These were not people you know,
Mm-hmm.
usually. Here, there for a few weeks, it felt like I was losing a friend or acquaintance every 2 days.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there for a period of time, I lost a fair amount of friends just
Mm.
here.
Mm,
Right.
And I don't know if it's my background or what, but you know, I got a little bit upset, but I dealt with it and I don't feel any of the symptoms of sleeping a lot and things like that. And I'm fairly active where I'm able to go to the library because I'm the librarian and I can, you know, I can do different things. I do read a lot, but I did that anyway. But what I'm dealing with now is that my roommate, who has a neuromuscular disease, she has Huntington's chorea,
mm,
and we've been together over a year now, but she's slowly getting worse and she knows it. And she'll say to me, my Huntington's is getting worse today. And I'm like, yeah, it is,
mhm,
because I can tell, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, oh my God, you know, what am I going to do when she's gone? Which I don't expect to happen soon. But still, it's that thing in the back of my head of,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's even a little bit of grief now
Mm-hmm.
because of what I
Yeah.
know is going to happen.
Right. Anticipatory grief. Yes.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. That's exactly what I think it is. And it's just, it's
It might,
hard.
it must be confusing to you because, dying isn't something that, dying is something, happens based on your professional career,
Right.
what you did, but you saw it in a different, from a different perspective than what you're
True.
seeing now. And it's hard. And I'm glad, I like that you're recognizing that you're saying, you know what, this is allowed to be different for me because it's personal now. It's not professional.
Right.
So,
And it's
mhm.
definitely different.
Yeah.
And the one thing I miss touch.
Mhm.
Very
Mhm.
good point. Yes.
Yeah.
You know, I
Oh.
miss touch. I mean, I
Mhm.
talk to pretty much the same people all the time.
Mhm.
So if I get a phone call or I have to make a phone call to somebody, it's sort of exciting.
Yeah, for sure.
A
Yeah.
new voice, a new person.
Yeah. Well,
So
and right. And that may require you to, to know that about yourself and reach out. When you're in the middle of lots of losses or have experienced one, those of you who have had someone, already die, people don't know how to treat you. They don't know what to say to you. They don't know how.
right.
And that's wrong, because all you have to do is be human, but people generally don't know. So you have to tell them. And that feels bad because you're the one that this is happening to, but you're the one that has to teach them how to treat you.
Yeah.
Mm,
I hear I hear everyone's frustration about that. I have the same frustration, but it is a reality. And you'd be surprised how people can respond if you tell them what you need. So it's really important to know that asking for something is powerful, not weak.
Mm.
Right. And I just know that the one thing here
Yeah.
is we're able to discuss our grief or whatever.
Yeah.
Because,
Mm.
we're really not allowed
Mhm.
off the floor. So, but there's a certain group of us that get together and,
Mhm. Talk about it.
we talk
Transparent.
about these things.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So-
The less that you skirt around the real issue at hand, the better you'll be for it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And Terry, when you said something about that you were an ED nurse, and for anybody else that's on this call that may have a medical background, for myself, I understand what you're speaking about that. You've had a professional mindset with around death for many years. And
Right.
now your mindset has had to change. It's now personal. And it's a completely different ball of wax as to how to deal with that. We put up
It is.
walls. We put up walls in order to do our jobs.
That's
And
right.
now your job is to try to break those walls down to really get to the root of the matter.
Well, and that, I did share with you guys what's going on with me and, with my mother. And that's, that's a risky thing to do when you're a therapist. But I've also learned that, it connects us when we talk about the things that, that we've been through. Nobody has to do it the way I did it. And, it's just to know that it's a real world experience is
Yeah.
important. So
Mhm.
talking about it is great.
Yeah.
It's great.
Somebody just wrote in the chat, which I thought was something very good to point out, is that the loss of a roommate, especially in this environment that we're in, is a huge loss. Almost,
Oh
I would
my.
equate to the loss of a spouse,
Yeah.
because they might be sharing that every day, 10, 12 hours, waking hours a day with that person. So to really honor that relationship and what that means to you. And I mean, there's just no getting around it. It is sad. It is a huge loss. And you know that there's going to be that decline there. Somebody had a question in the chat that I would like to put out to the group. If anybody has any suggestions as to how different resident homes are helping residents deal with COVID and with the grief associated with it. Any points that anybody has that they'd like to share that they've experienced?
Everybody's asking the same question, maybe. Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm. Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Well,
We've been asking that question for months, I guess, Shelley and Claire,
Mhm.
at this virtual family council, and trying to let people know that there are other ways to do things, I guess.
right. Well, again, this is statewide, but I think that places like our center, we're not the only people in the state. And I know that everyone, lots of agencies like ours are out there, willing to help, willing to do what they can do. And so, to ask the facilities that you're associated with if they've reached out to any grief and bereavement groups outside the facility, outside their own place, and that an outside perspective would be, really helpful to some people. So, that's maybe some way that you can help. Maybe somebody can, research options for your area to have. We've been doing things like this with lots of different groups. So it's I don't, I can't give you a list, but I think that in your individual areas, there's a lot of people that might be willing to help.
Yeah, and I think
one of the things,
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, you go.
I think one of the things that we're going to be dealing with is post-traumatic stress
Mhm.
among staff members as well.
Mhm.
When this is over, you talked about normalization. What is going to be their new normal? And I think that the facilities are going to have to deal with that, so that we're going to have resources prepared not only for the residents, but for the staff themselves.
Sure. The fallout of this is big. This is not an easy cleanup. And so this will be a lot, like that's what I was speaking about with that marathon. We may be coming out to a marking point with now that we're getting vaccines, but there's still the aftermath of all of this. And so, and I think that it'll vary facility to facility, how they handle the residents and the families of those residents. I know there's no really magic bullet that Claire and I can say, because there's so many different homes that we're dealing with here. But to know that, to keep open lines of communication open with your loved ones, and try to find allies within the staff at the nursing care homes. Who can you trust to help your loved ones? Who can help you communicate with your loved ones the best? I don't know if Claire, if you have experienced any of that, of finding personal touch point allies within your
Yeah, I mean, it's,
facility.
and again, I don't want to,
Everybody's different.
yeah, everybody's different. And, and I'm, yes, they know me there, and
Yeah.
I've had a good relationship with them, which helps. But you can build that. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
And to know what your primary goal is to help your loved one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can understand their perspectives, the facility perspective, but this, and maybe some of the things that you've learned today would be helpful to, express and say, to help them think about it a little bit more. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to help yourself. Here's
Yeah.
another comment.
Yeah, that post-traumatic stress is absolutely. Mhm,
Yeah, staff leaving, constant burnout.
mhm.
It's hard to form new staff relationships. Yes, so loss is compounded. Yes, it's very complicated, compounded grief, grief and loss. Yeah, again, no easy answers, of just continuing to talk through it. That's the point with mental health and with mindfulness, is that there's no quick fixes. I think everybody's, kind of sometimes wants that hit of a quick fix, and there is no quick fixes with this. We can kind of talk this out with each other, and you feel better with venting. But down deep in your heart that it's not going to be an overnight fix. Do you charge facilities for coming in and assisting them? Could you do Zoom conference with nursing staff? I would imagine that
Yeah.
yeah.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
we could. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do we charge? Yes, there is a fee. I mean, and it's a very minimal one that we do for our education kinds of things, specific to, facilities or whatever. But, we can also be creative with that too. So I wouldn't want that to let anybody not reach out. But
Yeah,
yes,
compare
we
your
absolutely would do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and you could, anybody who would, we can put you in touch with the person who will, work all that out with you if that's something that you might be interested in.
Or if staff is collectively grieving as well,
Mhm.
we do lots of educational services for that.
Right.
And support groups, that like Terry
Well,
was
Shelley, you did that really cool thing with the residents at one of the, a hospital in the Philadelphia region. They,
Yeah.
all the medical residents had a time, to
Yeah.
spend processing COVID. Excuse me. So that was pretty cool.
Just grief on all levels, the staff, the administration, families, the residents themselves. It's all encompassing. Yeah. So yeah, feel free.
Yeah, I just did a thing with a nonprofit that has a contract with the state to do contact tracing, and it's a a minority organization, and whoa, what a job, to do contact tracing, what they're dealing with when they call people to find out about that. So it's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's see if anyone, not to tell residents of other diagnoses, including COVID.
Yep.
Yeah, although it's probably obvious sometimes when residents are moving for cohorting. Yeah, there's lots of gray areas that happen with HIPAA, during all of this, that and that's like the debate. Do people have rights to know if their roommate has been COVID positive? That's a medical diagnosis. And so you get kind of in some gray areas. I think that's facility specific as to how they would probably deal with that. Really no easy answers to that. Yeah, it's probably obvious. Yeah. Anyone else have anything before our time is over?
Well, good.
Yes, I'm sorry, we do have another hand up.
Okay, great.
Okay,
It
good.
is Melanie Marie Hepburn. Hepburn?
Mhm.
Go ahead, Melanie.
Melanie?
Melanie, are you there? You have your hand up?
Mm,
Mm.
Oh, we can't
your
hear
audio,
you.
your audio is coming through a little wonky.
Melanie, how about typing it into the chat if you can?
We have another hand up then.
Okay.
Sabrina McLaughlin.
Okay.
Yeah, hi. I'm sorry, this is off topic, but I have a question about what the latest, most up-to-date information is about visitation, because it's been a long time since I've been able to get on one of these meetings.
Mm,
The last that I talked to the staff, the social work department at my relative's facility, I was told that even if we were both vaccinated, my resident and myself, that we still wouldn't be allowed to visit each other. And I wanted to know if that's the case. And I found that like rather frustrating, because it was my hope that if we were both vaccinated, that we would be able to finally be together.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Again, I don't think there's a specific answer to that, because I think it's facility specific, but I know in general, I think what the general concern is that even though when two people are vaccinated, is that there still is unwavering concern that we could be carriers of different variants. And so there's this, I think that you have less chance of contracting COVID and carrying it, but there still is that question mark. So I don't think I think unfortunately people don't know the answer to that yet. And so that's why they're probably giving you a very vague answer. Hopefully within the next few months, as we get into 1B and 1C, hopefully, that those questions can be more deliberately answered, but I think it's a gray area right now. But I can certainly understand your frustration, because you're probably thinking, aha, I finally got this, and so did my loved one. We can move on with life. And unfortunately, I don't think that's happening right now, sadly. And I think it's because of the variants and still being able to be a carrier and not have symptoms yourself. At least that's my take on it. That's what I've understood.
Yeah, I don't know whether the staff has anything more to offer about that. I don't.
Yeah, Sabrina, this is Jamie. We haven't seen any new documentation, any new guidance coming down. I think that's what they're reviewing now. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see something soon from CMS or Department of Health in the upcoming weeks as more and more folks get vaccinated. We're still waiting for a lot of our personal care homes to become vaccinated. I think most of our nursing homes are just getting their second round.
Yeah.
So I think that's something they're currently working on. And, as soon as we get it, we'll forward that along to everyone.
Yeah. Hopefully spring will have some hope to it. Yeah. No, you're welcome, Sabrina.
Shelley, Claire, Card Bob has a very nice thank you in the chat to make sure you see that.
Oh, good.
Oh, it has been our absolute pleasure. Jamie, if you just want to advance to the last slide, it just has our contact information on there of if you would need any type of support, whether it be individual, or if you would need us to possibly look into the venture of of doing what Claire spoke about, like education to a particular facility, please reach out to Ashley. Her contact information is on there and we can see what we can arrange. But it has been, I know, our sincere pleasure to be with you in this.
Yes, it really has.
Yeah.
It really
I hope
has.
you garnered some type of understanding of it a little bit more. Can be elusive. And so we hope that you've gotten some type of support.
And we thank you guys for, offering your expertise to us and these wonderful resources. There are several on your list there that I've never
Uh-huh.
heard of. So I'm looking forward to checking
Good.
those out.
Good.
So thank you so
welcome.
much.
Well, thanks.
And like I said, we'll definitely share those with everybody
Okay, great.
tomorrow, along with the recording. And we did do our Q&A. So I'm just going to review our upcoming topics to what we're going to be covering next. On February 23rd, we're going to invite our peers back. Those are our residents in long-term care facilities. They are going to offer their perspective on what's been going on for in their respective locations and kind of their take on some things. So we're going to put up something in the chat. So if you have, or in the chat area of the Facebook page, excuse me, if anybody would like to ask peers questions in advance, we can make sure we get that to them. And then, believe it or not, we're already into March. We're going to have Toby Ederman for the Center for Medicare Advocacy. And then we're going to wrap up March with a presentation on a prize. So we're going to learn a lot of different advocacy strategies and some resources to help folks along. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. We will be posting the video up on our Facebook page soon. If you have any specific questions or concerns, please contact the State Ombudsman Office, 717-783-8975, or send us an email, or you can always contact us on our Facebook page as well. So thank you, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.